Is it doing it? Oh yeah, here we go. Hello everyone. Welcome to the next episode of my podcast, Minecraft Peace. I'm your host, Katarina Newbury, and my guest today is Claudia Herman. Um, Welcome, Claudia.
Hi, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
It is a real pleasure to have you. I will introduce Claudia in a moment, but just to give people an idea of how we came together, I just share that we've been in each other's kind of online space for several years now. And I was just reflecting this morning that I've essentially come a full circle because I first learned about what you do through a podcast conversation with our mutual friend, Sam Geddes. And I was thinking, oh, this sounds really interesting what you do. And then I joined your Facebook group, and then you joined my Facebook group, and we kind of support people in a similar way, just using different modalities. But yeah, so it's a great pleasure to have you today, Claudia. And let me just say a few words about you so that people know why you're here today, because I wanted to have a conversation with you. And so, Claudia is a psychotherapist with a vast experience of over 25 years working with families and individuals, supporting especially neurodivergent young people and adults, um, families who foster. You yourself became an advocate. We can touch upon that to support your youngest, I believe. And basically, I think you're like oh no, like a beacon of light in the area of North Wales where you live, for all those who just don't feel like they fit in. They come with lots of baggage that comes with, being in the fostering system, maybe adoptive parent system. You support lots of people with trauma, and you've also authored two books, uh, wonderful practical books. So you're an author as well. And now, more recently, you've got into social enterprise, supporting your community and the mental health of your community. So you've there's loads to talk about, but we'll hone in just on a few. Is there anything you would add or want to mention at this point about, past this introduction?
Thank you so much. I feel like I should commission you to write my CV because that all sounds so much grander than it actually is. Thank you.
Well, it sometimes takes an outsider to kind of shine a light on what it is that we actually do. So I'll gladly do that. So nothing to add.
No, no,
Fantastic. Okay,
I
okay.
don't have in terms of introduction, I mean that was absolutely beautiful and wonderful. Thank you. And I can
Mhm.
rattle on for days about my areas of interest, and then you have to like rein me in and just cut me off eventually. So I'm gonna very deliberately try and hold back from getting overexcited. So I'm gonna be guided by you. So point me in the
Okay.
direction and then fire me off.
That sounds like a perfect plan. Yes, let's do it this way. Okay, so I'd like to always, I don't want to presume what people know when they come and, watch a video like this or listen to a podcast like this, about what therapy is, what trauma is, and how it helps. And especially with supporting those who have been through the fostering system. So as someone with a vast experience in therapy, how would you relate to someone what therapy is, how it helps, um, and why it matters so much for kids and young people who have been through the fostering system?
Yeah, so I'm going to chunk that down. So, because it's quite a broad question. So, trauma, if I first of all talk about what trauma is,
Mm,
so we overuse words and we use words slightly incorrectly, and we can say, "Oh, my cup of tea went cold. Oh, I'm traumatized." And we can be quite dramatic about things. So really, there's two types of trauma. There's single event trauma, where
mm,
we have something terrible happen to us. So maybe we're in a horrible car accident, and it's really, we really need to recover from that physically, emotionally, mentally. And we find it really hard to get back in a car again. And we have flashbacks and all sorts of things.
mm,
And so for an adult who has a single event trauma, as unpleasant as that might be, the recovery process, it's relatively straightforward, because when we experience trauma, the work is to try and remember what life was like before the trauma, to try and get ourselves back to that
mm,
place of safety. So before I had
mm,
this awful accident, I felt safe. That was my baseline of safety. I will get myself back there with support and intervention and therapy, whatever that looks like. With complex trauma, particularly early childhood trauma. So, complex trauma is trauma that happens over a long period of time. So, for an adult, that might be that we experience an abusive relationship and we're in that relationship for a
mm,
number of years, and it's a gradual day in day out kind of trauma. It's not a bang, here we go, this is trauma, this is what it looks like. And for young people who have early childhood trauma, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they will find themselves in the care system. It might be that they lose a parent very young, or there is a
mm,
very acrimonious relationship breakdown between the parents, or fundamentally, trauma is a frightening experience over which we have no control. That's why it's traumatic. So if we have a frightening experience and we do have control, we remove ourselves and we're safe and there's no trauma. So
right.
for people who experience trauma when they're very young, when they're children, it can be very difficult for them to establish a baseline of safety. So they don't have that point of reference. They can't go,
Mm,
"Oh, yeah, I remember before the event when I used to feel safe. I'll work my way back to that state of feeling." They have to build their own safety from scratch. And that's why it's so incredibly complex. So, what
mm,
that's like for parents and carers, working with and caring for and loving children or individuals who have had trauma in early childhood, it can be very, very difficult to try and go back and put it's like trying to, so you've built your house is gorgeous, it's lovely, it's shiny, but you forgot to do the foundation. So your house
mm.
is so vulnerable to falling over. So for people who've had childhood trauma, it's like, it's like Jenga in reverse, the Jenga blocks that you pull out, and you're doing that in reverse. You're trying to put blocks in. So that's why it's very
Mm,
complex. So in terms of therapy, the way that I work, it's very person-centered, in the sense that if I were working with you, I would be saying to you, you are the expert at being you. I have no experience of being you. I can put a ton of letters after my name. I still have no experience of being you. So then, if you started to unpack your experiences and the things that you were struggling with, it's a bit like when you go to the hairdressers, it's literally the only time that you look at the back of your own head. And that's the kind of therapy that I do. So you'd be sharing stuff, and I'm like the hairdresser with the mirror behind you going, "Oh, have you thought about looking at it from this direction? What does it feel like then?"
mm.
So I've just
Yeah, I
talked
love that.
a lot. Did that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'll just add that what's really helped me to, I guess, um, support my children when they were younger. Um, and I wish this was shared with parents well before they became parents, is that how crucial the first 6 to 7 years of life are. The fact that this is where we really build, like you said, the foundation of what it,
Mm,
does this world I live in, does it feel safe?
mm,
Is this a world in which I'm loved? Is this the world that I can be who I am? And if any of those are missing, because um trauma, like you said, is a bit of a buzzword right now, and people use it in many ways. But I love the work of Gabor Mate, and he talks about trauma as, not just the big T trauma, but also the
mm,
small, which is like any experience which we're unable to deal with and are left alone with, and yeah, leaves us just feeling vulnerable and unsafe. I've just really paraphrasing. This is not what he said, that it can leave a trauma. So it doesn't
mm,
have to be just a super traumatic experience, but because we were a child, obviously unequipped to deal with it, it leaves a mark that we drag with us for a lot of people for the rest of their
mm.
lives, because they never looked at it and just worked their life around it. And yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'd like to touch a little bit upon your role as a parent, as a foster parent, someone who supports has been supporting and caring for children as a foster parent. Um, we can only imagine what life must have been like for children who were basically, it was unsafe for them to stay with their own family, or for whatever reason were on their own, so they had to be placed with another family. Um, what How does it manifest, this loss of sense of safety? How does it manifest, maybe in like the day to day, from your experience?
So there's a lot of layers to this, and maybe the first important thing to say is that um, what the data suggests statistically, it's unusual for parents to get things very badly wrong from a place of malice. Parents
Mm,
tend not to get things badly wrong on purpose.
yeah.
So when young people find themselves in the care system because they haven't been able to remain with their biological family, very often there will be several generations of dysfunction, of
Mm,
families who have not had the resources, the capacity to parent appropriately. It's very, very unusual that we would wake up one morning, find that our life was a car crash and our kids have to leave our care. Um, and so for children, because our point of reference when we are a child is so, so, so tiny, we are the center of our universe. So if there is a problem for our parents, if our parents are struggling with something, we will create a narrative for ourselves in which we are the problem. So because when we're children, we have no power. We don't have financial power, we don't have decision making power.
mm,
We are entirely powerless, and we have to rely on the adults around us to keep us safe and make good decisions
mm,
for us and cook our tea and wash our clothes. So for children who are not able to remain in their biological family, unless they are provided with a more accurate, obviously age appropriately accurate narrative as to the reasons that they've ended up in the care system, they will default to a narrative in which it's their fault. They were not a
mm,
good enough kid. If they had been a good enough kid, their parents would have been able to be a good enough parent. That is not how it works. Children do not have power, control, or agency or responsibility for how adults behave and cope
mm,
and parent. So when children enter the care system, they carry with them this grief, this loss, this bereavement, because they've
Mm.
lost their biological family, they've lost their identity. Who are they now? And trying to, the fundamental issue of identity and who am I? Am I a kid who was not lovable? Am I a
Mm.
kid who was not good enough at
Mm.
being a good kid for my parents to be able to be good enough at being a good parent?
Yeah. And it's kind of, it's my fault that I am now
Yeah,
in the system, that I'm not with my, that I can't be with my own parents.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
there's also and we're lapsed foster carers, by the way, because our young person is with us forever now. We celebrated our 10-year family anniversary at the
Mm.
weekend before last. So for young people, when they're trying to navigate this and figure out um, who they are in terms of their biological origins, who they are now in their now family and their now life, their now world, their now school, and also who they want to be,
Mm.
because so much of our identity is handed to us. So if we grow up with our biological family, there'll be a ton of expectations before we're even born. So if we know
Mm.
that we're going to have a female child, we might kind of create a narrative of, oh well, she's going to be a ballerina and those sorts of things. So we we enter the world, we enter our biological family. If we are the oldest child in the family, there might be an expectation of, well, you're the oldest child, you're the sensible one. You're the youngest child, you get to be the baby of the family forever. There's an expectation that maybe you're a bit flaky. You're a female child, the expectation is that you will nurture people. You're a male child, the expectation is different again. Maybe you'll be good at sports. So you get the expectation within your family, the expectation within society, the expectation when you go to school, because you're a clever kid, you're a sporty kid, you're a musical kid, and then figuring out which bits of our identity belong to us, truly
Mm.
belong to us, and which bits of our identity have been handed to us by other people unconsciously,
Yeah. That's
and
kind
then
of
making a
true for
decision.
everyone, isn't it, really? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's so much more complex for young people who have navigated the care
Mm.
system,
Mm.
because there can be, when young people begin to have a more accurate understanding of the reasons that they found themselves in the care system, it can feel, um, people can feel very conflicted about seeing their parents as they are, seeing their parents as people who were having a hard time, who didn't have the capacity to parent appropriately, and to
Mm.
do that without criticism and judgment. It's
Mm.
not disloyal to look back at our experiences of being parented and to go, do you know what? My parents didn't do a great job of that. And I understand why that was, but that still wasn't really appropriate because I was a child and I did deserve to be safe and cared for. So
Mm.
we can hold compassion for ourselves and say that wasn't acceptable whilst not sliding across into judgment and criticism of our parents' situation.
That requires quite a lot of emotional maturity from what you've just
Tremendous.
described.
Yeah,
And I guarantee that there are so many adults who still haven't arrived at this point, whether regardless of whether they've experienced such a trauma or not. I as a parent have been on that journey, and I didn't realize how emotionally immature I was until, yeah, quite recently. So thank you for sharing that. It really makes you think. Now there's another layer to the challenges, if you like, for your children, which is their sensitivity, the fact that they're neurodivergent. in your experience and maybe experience from your clients as well, how does that then kind of fit in, or yeah, fit into the mix of, dealing with recovering from trauma and everything that the life brings, and now on top of that they are on the spectrum. Mm.
Yeah, so that's yet another layer. So
Mm.
for my daughter, she isn't care experienced. She's
Yes.
our biological daughter. My son is adopted, and so they're both neurodivergent young people with different complexities, because guess what? They're different people. And
Yeah. If you've met
so
one autistic person, you have literally met one autistic person.
absolutely.
Yeah,
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 you've met
yeah.
one care experienced person, you've met one care
Mm.
experienced person, you've met one person, you've met one person.
Yeah.
So, um, or if I talk about my daughter's journey, because that has fewer layers, perhaps,
Mm.
and for her, things that I observe and things that I observe in clients that I work with is that for neurodivergent people, whatever flavor of neurodivergence that is, autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dyspraxic, whatever it is that we're talking about, there is so much energy that is required to mask, to conform, to fit in. And this is about safety. This is a safety
Mm.
behavior, because we live in a society where our education system, and this isn't to be critical of our education system, because I am a former teacher and I loved every moment of my work. And I also found it enormously frustrating, because the rigidity within our education system, that means we have got fabulous practitioners who are not able to meet young people where they are.
Mm.
So you've got a class of 30 kids, you've got one who's flapping, one who's spinning, one who's crying, one who's you peeling them off the ceiling. And when you're working to a scale of 30, it's pretty much impossible for the most excellent practitioner to meet
Mm.
each child where they are. And
Yeah.
so when we actively ask our young people to mask, to conform,
Mm.
to fit in, because as educators, as a society, it inconveniences us. We do not have the capacity to hold space for people to be who they truly are. And that, if you are a neurodivergent person, that is not a you problem. That feels like a you problem, but it is not a you problem. That is not your
Mm.
fault or your responsibility, that we have a system that lacks the flexibility to accommodate you. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
absolutely. Yes. And there's so much we could talk about because this is an area that's very close to my heart as well. And I often mention that I feel like neurodivergent children and young people are here to kind of really make it so obvious how dysfunctional the system is so that
Mm,
it's no longer possible to ignore it because the it on their example because then I say to people often is that I don't necessarily think that there's a massive difference in um how let me put it no let me rephrase that. There are absolutely so many faults with our educational system. The only difference between neurodivergent sensitive kids and the, let's say, neurotypical, if you want to use that word, is that the neurotypical just have better capabilities to deal with the demands and the pressures, but it doesn't actually reflect anything on the system as well. Whereas the neurodivergent kids are there kind of basically screaming like, look at it, this isn't working, this doesn't serve us. And like you say, they just spend so much energy masking that there's no way that whatever they're trying to be taught is going in. So um we could go another tangent about what is they're actually being taught, but that's for
Yeah.
another
And
conversation.
just
So
kind of
yeah.
going back a few seconds to when we were talking about trauma, this
Mm.
is school trauma. This is school-based
Yes.
trauma, and this
Yeah.
is very, very real. And
Yeah.
when I work with adults who are neurodivergent, who have survived the school system in varying degrees, and a question that I often ask young people and adults, whoever I'm working with, whatever I'm working with them on, I will often say to them, when and where do you get to be 100% yourself?
Mm.
Because that's really important. That's safety right there. Where can you take the mask off, just be you without condition, without judgment,
Mm.
without worry? And something that's very, very sad is the frequency with which neurodivergent individuals will say to me, never. There's nowhere that I can be 100% myself.
Mm.
And somebody described it to me, a young adult described it to me, that they have masked for so long and so hard, they don't know how to take this mask off. And they don't know where the mask begins and ends
Yeah.
and where they begin and end.
Yeah.
And how do we create safety for somebody? How do we help somebody to create their own pot of safety
Mm.
when they have such fundamental difficulty with knowing who they are? This is the very core of their identity. And then a parent told me the other day, this is a complete aside now, hanging out with another parent at a social thing with kids. And they told me this story where their young person at their school, they had an express yourself day, which was a no uniform day. And I was like, that's tragic. So, like, let's have an express yourself day because all of the other days of the year do not express yourself. And then this express yourself day, it came with so many caveats of, well, don't express yourself like that. And
Oh dear.
it was truly hilarious, but
Yeah.
awful. And
Yeah.
and that's what we do all of the time to our kids.
Yes. Yeah. And as a parent, this has been one of the greatest challenges and lessons for me to come in unconditionally, basically be with my children because of, I think, again, regardless of whether that's my personal opinion, whether we are neurodivergent, whether we had trauma, I don't know about anyone who grew up being able to be fully and truly themselves.
Mm.
And that, yeah, as a parent, that's been like one of my greatest challenges is to then, as well as I can, I'm far away from perfect, but this has been kind of my challenge is to create this space as much as I can for my children's, because if they don't get it at school, at least there'll be somewhere, like you said, more of the safe spaces that they can be themselves. And when you talked about the masking and how these young people basically don't know where it starts, where it ends, they don't even know how to, who it is who it is their true self is. That's just so sad. That's really sad. And I always sometimes wonder, what it is that kind of I bring to my sessions, because sometimes I'm like, well, I just do what I do. But I think that beneath that is, and I'm sure for you it's the same, is just like you create an environment and a space where they actually can be and express themselves, but just be who they really are. But it is sad that it has to happen in a therapy session or
Yeah.
yeah, a
And
session.
what you were describing just there, there's so much courage in vulnerability that
Mm,
you have the personal courage to bring your own vulnerability to your parenting. And I feel like that's something that we do in our sessions.
mm,
We hold space for whoever we're working with, and we create safety within that space. We create a safe space whether it's just for 50 minutes a week for somebody,
Mm.
and that might be their first experience of somebody holding space for them and
Mm.
somebody saying, you know, this kind of, I suppose what underpins everything is this unconditional positive regard, you know, which is a
Mm.
very person-centered approach, where whatever somebody's bringing emotionally to the session, we just hold that for them, even if it's not nice, even if it's nasty. We just go, oh, well, I'll hold that for you. This is a safe
Mm.
space for you. And that might be the first experience that they have of that.
Mm. Yeah, I think we all need that because, like I said, I don't know about anyone who grew up being able, enjoying spaces where they can be who they are. Fantastic. So your work with clients we've touched upon. I know that you're specifically how would I say it matters to you greatly that your child's or children's needs are met in a school environment, and it's taking you on some journeys, including becoming an advocate
Yeah.
for a neurodivergent children. I don't know if that's the official title, probably not, but I know that a lot of parents supporting their neurodivergent children, the greatest challenge is to like working the system, navigating the system. Um, can you tell us a little bit what advocacy is and how it's helped you and your family?
Yeah, so what happened was I had been working as a teacher. I was a child protection officer. I was a special educational needs coordinator
Mm.
in my teaching role. And then when our young man joined us as a fostered young person, I'd been with my work hat on, I would go to child protection meetings and oh yes, it's very important and could have opinions and share my observations and everybody would go, oh yes, yes. And then our young man joined us and the very first meeting that I went to for him, because for young people in the care system, this is the other thing that is in really interesting to navigate, is they're parented very publicly. So you go to
Mm.
a meeting and there's like a million people there, which can be quite intimidating if you're not really familiar with that world. So I rocked up going, yeah, I'm familiar with this world. And it turned out that I was the village idiot. And I was like, hello, you know, just because I had this change of label, that I was
Mm.
no longer there as a professional, but as a foster
Mm.
carer. And foster carers are not
Mm.
professional, and we must not forget that. So I'd kind of be saying, well, here are my observations of what's going on at home, and here's how I feel school's going, and blah blah blah, and let's join up and work collaboratively in a child-centered way. I mean, goodness me, why on earth would you do that? So keeping the young person at the absolute center of what we're doing. And I would repeatedly be kind of told, you know, pipe down, you're just a foster carer, you don't have parental responsibility. And so the legal position for foster carers is that local authorities are the young person's corporate parent, which is such a
Mm.
beautiful, warm title for 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 parenting society's most vulnerable young people. So the local authority is the young person's corporate parent, and they outsource that parenting to foster carers who legally almost run you know, like an Airbnb for extremely vulnerable children. So don't turn up having a view of this young person who you live with and care for.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, so I'm doing this wrong. I'm using the wrong words. I'm not asking questions in the right way. I need to figure out what the language is here.
Mm. Mm.
Because my role has changed and everyone's just going, no. So I need to figure this out. There's something that I'm missing here. So then I retrained in advocacy, and obviously I could never be an official advocate for my son
Mm.
because it would be a massive conflict of interest.
Mm.
But what it did mean is that I was using the right language. I got the phraseology, and then people started to go, oh, Oh, maybe we should respond to that. And it's that's the thing about figuring out what the code is.
Mm,
So what I did for parents is on the website, I blog on one of my websites. I've got two. One is in a lot better shape than the other. The website that's in better shape has got loads of blogs on it. And one of the blogs is very snappily titled. I had to write it down. What to ask when attending meetings about your kids.
mm,
And it's got like a basically it's a crib sheet of how to ask questions in quite neutral but specific terms. So
mm,
that neutrality is so that overworked, burnt out professionals don't become defensive, because the minute they
mm,
become defensive, they're not hearing you anyway.
mm.
And then as a parent,
And they're
you
not
then
on your side. They're not going to be on your
no,
side or your children's side. Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And then as a parent, when you observe that the professional that you're really pinning all your hopes on has just disengaged, and then you become
Mm,
upset, and then nobody is hearing anybody.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's where the advocacy came in, and that's been incredibly useful. And advocacy work is still something that I do for families and for young people, and even for adults who have mental health challenges and they just want some extra support,
Mm,
or they want somebody to accompany them to a meeting, even just as a minute taker, just to make sure that there's
mm,
that clarity of, oh, have I understood this right? And that's a really, really good way to check
mm.
in any meeting is to say, take a notebook with you, jot things down, and say to somebody, can I check I've understood that right?
I love
So
that. And
rather than
I'll
going,
make sure, yeah,
because
I'll
the
make
old,
sure that the link to the blog and your website is in the notes so that people can go and find it because I can imagine how useful and beneficial it will be to everyone. Yeah,
because
really good to hear.
we're so emotionally invested in our young
Mm,
people. And
mm,
I often feel like as a parent, I can only be as happy as my most miserable child. So if we go into a meeting or we're trying to get something resolved for our kid, and we are feeling their pain,
mm,
there's this real vicarious pain
mm.
that we carry. And if we know our kid is struggling with something, we have already gone into this meeting so heavy with emotion.
Yeah, and again, that's true whether your child, you're actually supporting such a vulnerable child and have to go through these outsourced care meetings, or whether you just are dealing with something that happened at school and maybe your child is struggling and you need to speak to the teacher. I mean, I
Mm,
remember, quite a few occasions, and I really had to do the work, kind of the inner work on me to make sure that I don't go, yeah, try and kind of create a distance, like detach myself from those emotions. But also what's helped immensely was to try and put myself into the other person's shoes, try and see that, obviously don't know the ins and outs of their job, but like, I have an idea of what it is to be in a class with 30 children and the greater perspective and go into it with like, I want to make this work. I'm not here to create enemies.
mm.
What's the best way to, create a partnership or find a common tongue or, just and those meetings have always gone much, much better. Um, and yeah, often, everything was resolved. I mean, not always, but yeah, this helped greatly. Fantastic. Thank you. I'm just conscious of the time. So maybe are we okay for one last question or do we
Yeah,
need to wrap up? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
no.
Okay. So on top of doing all of this for parents and young people and children, Claudia also set up a social enterprise to help the greater community in her area. And it's a Welsh word that I'll try and pronounce, blodyn a haio, which means yay, which means sunflower. And I could not notice that you have a whole vase of them behind you.
I'm just a
So,
cliche.
oh no, 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 I love it. I love it. It was a great reminder. So, um, it's something that I in the future would love to be able to do as well, do something non for profit, something that would be there to help others, those who can't afford it or just don't know where to turn. Yeah, tell us about sunflower.
So, Blood in a Heil, I'm not a native Welsh speaker, and my Welsh is pretty ropey, and it's a constant work in progress trying to improve my Welsh. But Blood in a Heil is Welsh for sunflower. And my nerdy bit of information about sunflowers and why I like them so much is that they turn to follow the sun.
Hmm.
And the super clever thing that they do is when the sun isn't available, like on a cloudy day or at night time, they turn themselves towards each other. So when it's not possible for them to take energy from the
Oh.
sun, they take energy from each other.
Mm.
So it's a
Wow.
floral peer support system.
And it's ingenious.
It's
It's
just so
fantastic.
clever. So
Yeah.
we've so much that we can learn from sunflowers. So the social enterprise is very much in its infancy, very, very much in its infancy. And it requires a lot more work to get it
Mm.
to where I want it to be. I want it to be self-sustaining. I want it to be able to exist regardless of what I'm doing. If I stepped away from it, I would want it to be able to be self-sufficient and continue to exist. So at the moment, it's a pay what you can therapy service where there's a suggested donation amount, but if somebody can afford to pay a fiver for a therapy session, they pay a fiver. That's fine. Um, so it's the bit that I kind of need to navigate is I need to get a lot better at applying for grants and funding and things like that. So that's an area of learning for me.
Mm.
Um, and the other thing that I want to develop is I want to develop a network of peer support unpaid carers. So Blood in a Heil. So the the therapeutic support that is my independent work, my private practice work, that's open to anybody. But the Blood in a Heil is specifically targeted at carers, every kind of
Mm.
carer. So for a lot of unpaid carers, it's something that happens to them over a period of time. They
Mm.
find themselves in a role that they didn't apply for or train for, and it's unpaid. And when you find yourself as an unpaid carer, whether it's for your young people or your parents or a family member or your partner or whatever curveball life throws at you, and you've just absorbed that care responsibility in a very gradual way, and then you don't notice how heavily that
Mm.
weighs on you. And when you have um, care commitments, how do you prioritize care for yourself? So when we look at the data, and I'm really nerdy, so I'm always looking at data. When we look at the data, the risks to unpaid carers in terms of their own mental health, their own physical health, that not being able to find the time or the resources to care for themselves. And when unpaid carers burn out, and they cannot perform that role anymore, that's a very big problem for everybody. So that's kind of the gap that I want to try and address. But because of my own unpaid care responsibilities, I'm doing it very slowly.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a big reason for this, and it's yeah, it's personal, isn't it? Wow. I don't know how you do it, Claudia, to be honest.
Caffeine. It's
Manage
caffeine, yes.
well, not all of it, like all of what you've just described. And yeah, please don't get rid of caffeine for Claudia's sake. Oh, fantastic. I could talk to you for hours. I really could. But I am conscious of your time and I appreciate the time set aside to speak to me. I wonder, we live in a very chaotic world right now. It's very busy out there with I mean, wherever you turn your attention, there's some seems to be something that feels probably quite overwhelming for a lot of people, never mind dealing with our own kind of personal stuff. What keeps you going? What keeps you to turn towards the sun or others? Where's your sunflower?
I'm surrounded by them. I've got some on my desk right here. So anyway,
Yeah,
so
any
I,
message to
yeah,
struggling parents or,
I, I
carers.
think, I think it's about when we feel overwhelmed, one day is literally one day. And if one day feels too much, 5 minutes is 5 minutes. And, I've been there where I've been kind of like, right, oh, breathe. This is a new 5 minutes. This 5 minutes might be better than the previous 5 minutes. And just really chunking it down into manageable amounts for ourselves.
Mm.
And finding or making a little pot of self compassion on those really, really hard days when we feel rubbish and we feel like we've done everything wrong and we can't get anything right and we yelled at the kids and that isn't the sort of parent we want to be. To find that bit of self compassion and go, do you know what? I'm doing my best. And this is what my best looks like today. And tomorrow, when I've had more sleep and I've a different set of resources,
Mm.
my best will look different again.
I
So
love
it's
that.
it's just that give holding a space for ourselves
Do you
and
know you
allowing our
that's mindfulness in action, basically. So you've developed compassion for yourself and you're taking, you know, small amounts of time in which you can be, just pause and reflect. And yeah, fantastic. I really like that. Yeah.
absolutely, and to kind of when we notice ourselves speaking unkindly to ourselves, to
Mm.
just press pause on that and go, who else would I talk to this way? Like literally nobody. So we allow our kids or our partners or our friends, we allow them to have a bad day and be in a right old grump. We get to do that too. We don't get to live there, but we get to visit, and that's
Mm.
okay. We're not going to live there.
And even if we haven't been very compassionate to ourselves, one day tomorrow's another opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, the next five
Yeah.
minutes is a new
Yeah, or the next
opportunity.
5 minutes, try again. I love that. Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you for everything that you do. I know you transform lives and it so needed. And I hope you find it fulfilling for yourself as well. And best of luck with sunflower. I'm not gonna attempt to say the Welsh word again. Yeah, thank you again for
Oh, well,
taking the time to speak to me. It's been a
thank
great
you.
pleasure.
It's been an absolute joy, and I love following your work, and I really enjoy your content. So we'll continue to stalk each other
Yes, we'll
online and
carry on
maybe
in
meet
that.
in real life one day.
I know. It's there somewhere in the stars. Yeah, we'll make it happen one day. Fantastic. Thank you so much again, Claudia. Have a great rest of your day and yeah, speak soon.
Thank you
Take
so
care for
much.
now.
Take care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.